Okay, so let's reel it back in, come to sit, and let's have a nice little chat. I might stay standing if you don't mind. You're welcome to sit because I like to play with the principles, like do the whole axes thing. So I gave you guys a handout, and this is also going to be in your Google folder about the 12 alignment principles that we focus on in the AerialX program. So the regenerative therapeutics is the RX meaning therapeutic or medicinal version of AerialYogaPlay. So AYRX is the new branding. And so we're doing a combination of AerialYogaPlay and AerialX Therapeutics in our training. So you will be getting 2 certifications. Okay, you will be getting the basic intermediate AYP, and you'll be getting the basic AerialX. Okay, so there's going to be advanced and advanced plus for each one of those, but it's a dual certification, so you can already start introducing some of these principles into your teachings, which for some students, or I usually call them clients, some clients that's going to be really attractive to offer a therapeutics class, to offer something where you can focus on the neck or the lower back. So the AerialYogaPlay is broken up into poses. The AerialX program is broken up into body parts. So we do head, neck, shoulders, lower back, because people don't know what a sumo is, right? So when I present an AerialX class, I always define like neck and shoulder release, or strengthen core, so people can recognize body parts. So it's a little bit more user-friendly for people who aren't as familiar with the AerialYogaPlay practice. Now for people who've never done anything like this, the play is a great place to start because they're just learning P is for play, P is for practice, P is for poses, okay? That's how I remember it, and that's how I like to share. So we're going to go over all 12 of these alignment principles and apply them to the poses that we just learned. Now we're going to do that kind of sporadically and randomly since I usually teach the AerialX program in a 4-day package, like in a row. So we do like upper body, lower body, yoga saj, partner. We're going to pop all over the place so you guys can make requests or say, okay, how would I apply this in a chilaxin pose, or how would I apply this in the inversion? So we can have a discussion like that too. But let's first go over all 12. And then today, we're going to focus on 6 of them. And tomorrow, we're going to focus on another 6 and really deep dive applying them to the poses that we've learned throughout the weekend. Okay, so we're going to do a few more new sequences today, but for the most part, we're going to actually review what we learned today and yesterday and apply some of these things. So for example, we'll just go down the list and do them in this order. I do have them in a particular order, not exact, but this is how they occur to me. The first thing that we focus on with the swing is the spine. Okay, this is really important because the spine is the central pathway that holds up our body weight and our head. It's really obvious. But it's also overlaying the nervous system and the chakra system, and accesses our ethereal body and our astral body and all of these energetic systems. Most people who are suffering from lower back or neck and shoulder pain do not realize that they're being cut off from their energy supply. It's kind of like a kink in a straw, right? So that description allows them to be like, oh, right, this is a pillar. That's why we work with this vertical axis, and we find our column that's going to hold our energy. And if there's an energy leak, it'll show up as pain in the body in one of these 2 major hubs. So I break the AerialX program into upper body and lower body because those are the 2 intersections where our limbs plug into our energy systems. And this plugging in, we're going to get into quite a bit about how our shoulders plug in and how our hips plug in. That's how you turn on the circuitry. Is everybody with me?
Yes.
This is making sense? So I talk about dynamic tension. And tension, even in the word itself, can be misleading as like a stress, but tension is like a guitar string. It needs to be pulled in both directions to be tuned and toned properly. Every person's body has a unique signature or a harmonic. And if it's out of tune, it won't be able to resonate or make the right frequency for that body's optimal health. So dynamic tension happens when we drop our sit bones, press our hips down, as well as lift our sternum. So all the pose, when I say hips heavy, heart open, head relaxed, that's what I'm trying to do, is create that dynamic tension where the upper body is lifting and the lower body is dropping. And if we're upside down, it's reversed, but it's that idea that we're actually pulling and lengthening the spine by pressing down and lifting up simultaneously. And you'll notice when people press down, their whole body goes down, or when they lift up, their whole body goes up. So this dynamic tension is key to healing. So the swing helps us by pulling us up and gravity pulling us down, so we have something to play with. So there's just a little description there of the lift upper body while simultaneously lowering hips to lengthen the spine. So that's the language I would use. You can, make it short and sweet to describe that. Tractioning the spine out of the pelvis to create space for the vertebrae is my other favorite line. If you can remember all that, it is really helpful to get that visual of tractioning the spine out of the pelvis. That's why we have the swing around the hips in all the inversions. Okay, so the next part that I like to focus on, and this is all review at this point after you've been hearing me all weekend, is the sternum. I really like to focus on the heart space. Most of the time, people are head first in the world and their chest is concave and collapsed. So we have to get that vertical axis in that pillar. That's the only way we can lift the sternum, right? It immediately changes the position of our head and our gaze. So that is so important. If there's nothing else that you even remember to say in an AerialYoga class, just lift the sternum, lift the heart. Most people don't know where the sternum is. They're not even really sure where the heart is. So, usually hands here helps. Okay, and then next goes straight up to the head, right? And our plumb line. So a plumb line is like, a kite lifting us up and like a little string with a weight on it, finding that center line. And most people are just completely out of alignment. I mean, this is basic. Even when they're exercising, they're strengthening muscles around the misalignment, and then it's just reinforcing the asymmetry. The swing is so good at finding the symmetry and keeping us honest along our plumb line or axes. I usually use the word axes, but plumb line is something like fishermen are used to referring to. So that is most important, that we find our pillar. This is why I think the mats help to define the space, but you are in charge of your head and where you position your head. So I want you guys to be hyper-focused today and the rest of the weekend around your position of your head and finding your axes, finding your pillar in all of the poses, whether we're upside down or not, right? So I showed you that one picture where your head went back a little much, and in the first picture, your hips were collapsed and your head was in a line. And then when you pushed your hips forward, your head went out. So it's like a relationship between those two hubs that's so important for us to get and play with. So we know when we're directly on axes. That's our power. That's our power point. It's kind of like all the circuits go on.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah. And when you were saying it's hard to contain the energy, well, when all the circuits are on, it'll just flow straight through. Otherwise, we get kind of frazzled. So there is something to that. Number 4, this entire practice is a heart-centered practice. Every single pose is about leading with the heart. Leading with the heart is just as symbolic as it is literal in the fact that if we're moving head first into the world and making decisions from our head, it's usually either conditioning or fear-based reality or some cognitively learned behavior, some type of conditioning. And it's really important for us to open up our energetic field, our electromagnetic field, so our heart can lead the way. So head directly over the body, gaze slightly up, because everyone is looking down on their phones. I hope you're not looking down while you're driving, but who knows? But there's so much looking down, and looking down is also, again, I love getting into, in the ACE program, we dive deep into the empowerment and the coaching and talking about emotions and spirituality and all that, which is the 3rd module. But in the AirX, we just talked about the body mechanics and body alignment and hint. So if you're looking down, that's an emotional state. When people are down, when they say chin up or look up, it's a totally different state of being. So So all these things that are very literal are also symbolic about how we're feeling about ourselves. You know, when we look down, we're either shy or embarrassed or something like that too. So I have literally had to retrain people to look at me. I'll say it all the time, look at me, and they're, you know, anywhere I'm like, I'm not that bad looking. No, it's just really important to invite that, you know, that intensity of intimacy when we're actually looking up and looking at someone as opposed to looking down when we're talking. So it's just an invitation, and if people get too uncomfortable, we let it go. But it's just an invitation to like, oh, let's change that, usually conditioning, learned behavior, right? And get more comfortable looking up. So position of the eyes. So usually I just say look up, and I don't get into the whole thing about lead with the heart, da-da-da. If you look up, it usually does all of those ergonomics simultaneously. Okay, lats. Okay. So we're going to do way more getting into our lats and putting our wings on their back, probably digging into that one tomorrow. But we want to squeeze the bottom tips of the shoulder blades together. I said this several times in poses like flying monkey. The other cue is to externally rotate the biceps. So sometimes, like in archer, thumbs out, right? That externally, this is internal rotation, this is external rotation. This is all kind of pulling from Anusara and those alignment principles. So squeezing the bottom tips of the shoulder blades together is another way to blossom the heart forward, okay? It's really fun. Most people are squeezing the top tips of the shoulder blades together, crunching up their neck and creating stress, okay? We actually spread the shoulders apart and squeeze the bottom tips of the shoulder blades together, and that's what puts the wings on the back. Engaging the lats, that's what the swing does. It gives us something to pull down against and really feel that sleepy muscle, because that muscle will get a little lazy, a little quiet back there, because these muscles are getting overworked, and the counterbalance muscle is underneath. Very important. And then the shoulder loop. So we have this external spiral in the upper body, and we have this internal spiral in the lower body, and these two loops have to do with the spiral dynamics, which we'll learn more in Module 3 as well, about what is a microcosmic orbit, what is a toroidal force field, what is a Merkaba, all of these fancy words that are talking about spiral dynamics and how energy moves in spirals. It's all Fibonacci and golden ratios and all of that stuff that is, for me, very interesting, because I love how quantum physics inspires the movement, and it literally is like in everything, like the Nautilus shell. And if you look around, all the man-made buildings are very linear, very boxy, either square or rectangular, and it goes against our nature. It goes against the natural spin and multidimensional movements that are inherent to our bodies. So we want to entrain and retrain our bodies how to move in a spherical way so we can take up space and like kind of claim our bubble. It's like, I call it the body of light, or the bubble of energy around our body. So the shoulders externally rotate and the lats pull back and down and together. And when we do this, we actually are taking up more space and creating more of that spherical nature. Most people are, they've learned to kind of curl in, usually out of like an armoring or protecting or shyness or whatever the story is. There's always a story there.
Even shame.
They're all in there. So this idea of broadening and expanding our shoulders, it has like a proud or a confident stance, right? So we're shifting our posture in the swing, and then when we get out of the swing, we walk different, we move different, we take up space differently. And it really is that important. I mean, I designed this swing specifically to have a practice to embody the empowerment teachings. So I very specifically chose these poses and these sequences to create that relationship to the body. And we'll get into more of the philosophy behind it as we go along. So shoulders externally spiral out, external rotation, legs internally rotate. So we spread the sacrum and the sit bones. So even here while you're sitting, I want you to press your pubic bone back and down. So you're spreading the sacrum and sit bones. This is a totally different position for the pelvis. So and most people are just the opposite. They're like, I'm exaggerating only slightly. They push their pelvis forward and they're all rounded in. So this whole idea of blossoming through the chest and then letting your sit bones rock back So your pubic bone rocks under a little bit, and then you internally rotate the thighs. And it's a totally different position in the body. We'll work on the spirals tomorrow. So hips heavy. So when we press our pubic bone back and down, we also press our tailbone down, right? So we don't just duck out, right? Like you see some people walking like a duck. We actually want to create another dynamic tension of the pubic bone and the tailbone pressing towards one another, which lifts the energy up through the center line of the body. It's kind of like a straw through the pillar of light. It's like all the way up to the crown of the head, and that is when the Kundalini energy starts to spin and spiral up the spine and awaken our energy field. Very cool stuff, okay? So when I say hips heavy, it's a shorthand version of tucking the pelvis under and pushing the tailbone down to lower your center of gravity and give the Kundalini energy an opportunity to move up the spine. We're usually pinching ourselves off at the lower back, at the lumbar and at sacrum. Learned behavior again. I don't think anybody tried to do this deliberately, but we become afraid of our own power when that starts to open and we feel the energy start to rise, and then people shut it back down. So there's an energetic cleansing and clearing process as it goes through and starts to bump up against all of the stored energy that hasn't been processed. So if an emotional charge comes up, if shame or anger or sadness or whatever it is, bring it into this cauldron of creation and transformation to let it move through, because it will move through, it will shift, it will change, it will transmute. It's the power of the energy itself that does the healing when we let it move. So that is really how powerful this practice is, right?
Is it all right if I speak something to that? So much so that, because I've been trained as a somatic psychotherapist and how the body is organized, emotionally. And what I realized is that talking about it actually keeps it from moving out. And what I've learned with this practice is that if I feel it, name it in my mind, witness it, and then the practice actually helps transmute it.
There has to be a movement.
Yeah.
There has to be a movement.
And doesn't need any narrative, really.
Well, it's okay to bring awareness to it, but the narrative will keep it up here sometimes and not fully in the body.
Yeah.
So it's powerful to just use all those tools together. It's an integration.
It's been interesting for me in my own body to witness that.
Yeah, you can know all day long.
Yeah.
Until it's embodied wisdom, it's just a story.
Yeah.
When it's embodied wisdom, you own it. It's your power. That's why this work is so important to me, And it's challenging, like we're going to butt up against those little blocks or those little stuck spots, and I welcome you to just go into it, be with it, bookmark it, whatever you need to do to just bring more self-awareness, more acknowledgement to where we all have our blocks. I mean, I've been doing this work for a really long time. I still have blocks. I'm not like there is no there. As soon as you're there's another level. We've been talking about echelons. I'm at the top of one echelon, and I get to be at the bottom of the next echelon. I get to be a beginner again at a whole nother level, and so that's how it is. So even if you've been studying Pilates and teaching for so long, this is going to be another echelon, right? So, I posted something the other day about let us be willing to suck at something new.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, be willing to suck at something new.
I saw
That is so courageous.
It is.
That's real courage, because especially if you're masterful at something, you're like, I don't like sucking.
Yeah.
It's really humbling for the little mind that's like, I was so good at this other thing. Okay, we digress. So we are going to focus on our core engagement today, pivot points, lifting the navel in and up, and using the entire torso as our core. So most people think of core as right here, this little stomach area. Your core is literally your entire torso. And when you activate that and work with your pillars, so you're in a plank all the time, whether you're horizontal or vertical, then you have power running through that straw, right? Otherwise there's a kink, usually at the neck or the lower back, and we want to get the kinks out. Okay. We worked on quite a bit yesterday. We're just going to keep going with these, and then we're going to circle the ones we're going to work on today. So arch from the upper thoracic spine, using the upper back to initiate our back bends. So most people are hyper-curved in their lower back and hyper-curved in their neck, and their upper back is rounded, you know, because the spine is in S shape no matter what. So if we change the position to put the arch and the curvature of the upper back, it's kind of like we get to lean into a platter that has an end point. If we curve at the lower back or the neck, it's 100% going to pinch or kink. Thinking that's where the straw kinks, right? So we learn how to engage through our core, pulling our navel up and in, keeping our head in line with our body, and then move from the upper back, and that's how we keep our pillar. That's how we keep our plank. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So moving to that stuck and sticky spot behind the heart, because of all the matters of the heart, since the heart's been kind of rounded in and concave for a lot of people, they push all that emotional stuff to the back body. That's what the back represents. All the stuff we didn't want to deal with, right? Back in the closet. Once we push on that area and push the heart forward, it's like, whoa, wait a second, you know? Like all of that stuff comes up, and that's why people find the swing so uncomfortable. You'll see them kind of wrestling with it. It's hitting all those spots that they were like, that's my storage unit, you know, don't go in there. So we want to gently explain to them, you know, we're moving the arch to the upper thoracic spine, and that's going to allow us to open and blossom the heart. That's usually enough, and they'll figure out what that means down the line, or come to us for a private session. Okay, stacking the bones. This is so important. Even if you've never done a day of yoga in your life, one of the most important things that you can do is stack the bones. That means your feet are hip distance. Your hips are not this wide. When I say hip distance and everybody stands this wide, I'm like, you either have body dysmorphia or you're just not sure where your hips are in space. Hips, ankles, knees. The same with the hands. When I say hands down arms, I have to say it every time. Place your hands directly under your shoulders, stack your shoulders over your wrists, elbows. You cannot bend your elbows and have your arms stacked. Got it? We always keep the arms straight when we're stacking. When I say stack the bones, I want that to be automatic. Boom, boom, boom. That is the strongest, the straightest line of energy. Same here. Stacking the bones. Straight line. You know, these people are like this. Same with the T. Stacking the bones. Everybody, when they start out, and all the poses are like this in a Y with their head coming forward. And it's not the strongest position in the body. This is the strongest position, so that's why I have people flap their wings, just to kind of play with it. And then it's not this, straight out, stacked. So I want you guys to really pay attention to stacking the bones in all the poses. And get it quick. So when I say stack the bones, you're like, boop, boop, boop. Instead of me being like, hands directly underneath the shoulders, elbows straight, shoulders directly over the wrists, because I usually have to go up each one. So just try getting that, because it is super important. You can't do any of the handstands or inversions or acrobatics unless the bones are stacked. You will just collapse like a, bag of chips. That's not the analogy, but I am. Okay, stacking the bones, hands, shoulders distance, feet, hip distance, everything stacked in a straight line. Doesn't matter if we're here, here, or here. They're all stacked, right? Different planes. Support the head with interlaced hands, elbows wide, lift up and out on a diagonal. We're gonna work on that tomorrow with chillaxing arms. That one is super duper important. Most people are not doing that correctly. But right now, I'm just happy that they're supporting their head. So let's talk about what we are going to work on today. And I'll take requests. Okay, so we're obviously working on our plumb line.
Yeah.
We've talked about this a million times already. We're obviously working on core engagement. Circle these with me. We're obviously working on the spine and dynamic tension. So as we review, I'd also like to work on the hips heavy.
Yeah.
Okay, and the sternum lifted. That's 5. And then lead with the heart. All right, we're all on the same page. Good job.
I'm missing one. Spine, sternum, head plumb line.
Hips heavy, and then core activation. Actually, let's work on stacking the bones, because
that's a good one.
We'll save the leave the heart and the wings and the shoulder. They all go together, and the hands for tomorrow. And then we'll work on the spirals tomorrow. Okay, we're gonna work on them all. I just want to emphasize these. Okay, so now we get to play and what this looks like and what this feels like in the body. Any questions? Really? Nothing? No.
Maybe.
Nothing to say, everyone's got this?
Well,
Okay, so there's two ways we can do this. I can say, okay, show me what this looks like in a sumo squat. And then you guys will show me. We can do it the other way where you're like, Jen, Healy, show me what that looks like in a sumo squat, and then I can show you. Would you feel like it would be more empowering for you to show me, or for me to show you, to do it all together? You get a little bit of, a democracy here, where we get to decide as a group, how would you best like to practice and learn these alignment principles?
If we show you.
Thank you.
yeah, I'd like
think
to get
so,
it
too.
on the body.
Yeah, as long as you guys don't get shy about it, and I will pop up and show you as well.
I'm not afraid to suck.
That's the spirit. That's the attitude I was looking
Okay,
for.
so would you want us to take turns? Like maybe Deborah can take one, and then I can take one, and then
well,
I
let's
get to
just
see
start-
it in Deborah's body. But I like to see it in different
Mhm.
bodies too, because your body is so perfect. I want to see
Right.
it in.
Everybody heard that on camera.
No, but it's nice to see it in different
It
bodies.
is important to see it in different bodies, and it's also important to feel it in your own body,
Yeah.
because this is new to you. Even if you are masterful in your own domain, this is going to be new to you. It's going to be new to you because we all have different habits, and those habits are going to be challenged. So I'm here to kind of point them out and poke at them,
Yeah.
shine a spotlight on them.
I'm happy
Okay.
to do whatever.
So what pose, and this is the game, the fun game we're going to play for the next 10-15 minutes. What pose do you feel is the best representation of dynamic tension?
Oh, dynamic tension.
Yeah, so we're just
I
going
would
to
say, for me,
Yeah.
in my body,
Mhm.
definitely the one we did with the legs wide.
So dynamic tension is with the hips heavy and the sternum lifted to
Okay.
lengthen the
Oh,
spine.
then the chillaxin pose.
Great, so come into chillaxin, and I want you to feel and experience with a focus, and do the same one, Deborah. Same pose. You both get to feel and experience dynamic tension in a chillaxin pose. So I'm gonna mimic it with you, so the people that are watching the video aren't like, oh, Jen's just sitting on the floor. But I want you to talk me through it,
Okay.
Barbara. You're
All right.
leading this one,
Okay,
okay?
so we're going to come into our vertical axis, and we're going to have our arms by our sides, by our waist, below the rib cage, slightly pressing down into our swing is to just
Keep
even
it
feel.
simple.
Okay.
Just lean back, come into a sumo squat. Keep it real simple. Like, it's too many words, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and then forearm press, diamond with the arms. Yeah. So you just want to get into chillaxin and talk about the dynamic tension. Although that was great, it was going to be 5 minutes before. So chillaxin.
Yeah. So
Describe-
even right here,
Mhm.
just even the dynamic tension of
Yeah.
dropping my pelvis and keeping my tail tucked under. And I could even probably do a few little tucks to feel that.
That's only half of the dynamic tension though.
Yeah.
So dropping in the pelvis and
Yeah.
tucking under is another alignment principle, but dynamic tension is specifically, and you're not doing it wrong, you're just talking about one part. I want you to talk about these two parts together. Most people drop their hips and their upper body sinks
Yeah.
and they completely lose it. Or they lift their heart and they push their pelvis forward. So talk about and experience dropping your hips and lifting your heart simultaneously and what that feels like.
Okay. So dropping my hips and lifting my heart, pressing my heart into the strap. Pressing the back of my heart into the strap, and that time exactly.
Notice exactly what happened.
So
it's either one or the other.
yeah,
So
exactly. So as
Go
I
back
did
and
that,
forth.
I lost my tail. So now I'm having sort of a tail-heart connection where my heart is open and my tail is heavy towards the ground. And there is
perfect.
a dynamic tension in that.
That is the dynamic tension. It's usually one or other. You can see, is there a problem in the upper body? Is there a problem in the lower body based on this pose?
Yeah. So that's really good.
Okay. And I just want us to bring awareness to it in a pose that we learned yesterday, but with the alignment principles kind of integrated in.
Yeah.
And we could do all of the alignment principles for just sumo. We could do all the alignment principles for chillaxin. So that we're gonna bop around and just pick poses and then play with them. And this is a little bit more like the randomized version as opposed to how I usually go through it, but I think this is fun.
Yeah.
So Deborah, how about you? What type of dynamic tension do you want to play with? Like which pose would you like to use this alignment principle? What comes to mind?
Well, balance.
Yes, that is a good one, except in that pose, and you're absolutely right, you're not able to use gravity, right? If you would like to try balance and have dynamic tension, that is totally fine, but it's going to be really hard for you to get that in that particular
But you're
pose.
playing with gravity. You're having to manage.
You're gonna have to artificially create the dynamic tension because gravity isn't doing it for you and the swing isn't doing it for you. Let's try chillaxin. Will you talk us through the dynamic tension in chillaxin and see how it feels? So leg loops go behind the knees. Talk us through it.
Oh, sorry. Straight arms pulling down on the leg loop, and leg pulls all the way through, goes behind the knee. The leg loop is bunched, activating the core, and softening through the legs. Drop your pelvis, drop your sit bones down to the floor, and feel the weight of the pelvis reaching to the floor as you lift up in your sternum so that you're pressing your shoulder blades down, or at least I am. You have to press your shoulder blades down, get that lat engagement so you're not tearing into your armpits. Crown of the head reaches to the ceiling, trying to relax the legs. So you get the softness through the legs and the weight in the pelvis and the lift out of the crown of the head. I'm closing my ribs, so I'm not popping my ribs open, but extending and opening through the chest. And a nice heavy head in my hands to open up the heart to the ceiling. But it takes me a lot of thought to keep relaxing my tailbone, my sit bones, because I'm inclined to kind of contract and pull up. So I keep on reminding myself, if I lift from my chest, then equal and opposite release and weight in my sit bones.
Yes, and that's the key here. Most people are going to lift their hips and go way too back into a back bend, and they're going to lose their pillar.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I just invite them to have heavy hips. So I always go hips heavy, hips heavy, hips heavy like 100 times because they'll float away. Even when we start to do swagger, first thing they'll do is push their hips up towards the sky. Even here, we're pushing our sit bones down to lift our heart up. That's dynamic tension. Can you guys start to feel the difference when we invite that into the conversation? Beautiful. And these two were perfect examples. These two poses are perfect examples. We do it in every single pose, but these two really give us an opportunity to feel our spine. So now that we understand the ergonomics, how does it feel in the body to create this space? What do you notice what is the benefit of the dynamic tension?
Well, there's a traction effect.
Even in the upright positions, right? We don't even have to go upside down to traction the spine out of the pelvis to create space for the vertebrae. It's here if we use gravity and use lift. We'll be missing out on that tractioning if we're pushing our hips up or dropping our chest down,
Yeah.
right? Because we're going to be crunching and contracting through the spine instead of getting a nice long line of energy.
And I find there's an equal engagement of the upper body because we could just sit down here and get nice and heavy, but that
Yes,
equal engagement, find the
right.
lengthening and the lifting, but the releasing.
Exactly. It's engaged but relaxed.
Yeah.
That's the kind of like juxtaposition that happens in the spine. So we're strengthening and lengthening at the same time in all of the poses. Most people are either super flexy or super strong, so that means they're only using half of their body's capacity.
Yeah.
When we use them together with this dynamic tension, we're using 100% of our power. I think that's really key. That's like clutch in terms of hooking different people. You know, obviously women tend to be more flexy and men tend to be more strong, but there's no reason for that. That's more just a learned behavior.
Yeah.
You know, so strong and flexible, limber and open and engaged is the most healthy and optimal form for our body, most optimal use. Beautiful. Well, that felt good. Okay, let's keep playing with the sternum lifted and the heart open. Why don't we go ahead and have you, Barbara, take us into another pose.
Okay, so why don't we
Notice where your pelvis is right now, by the way.
Okay.
So we keep these alignment principles like all the time. Okay.
So
This is killing my hip though. My sciatica stuff.
Well, go ahead and just release one leg down. And
Okay.
maybe that would be good.
Yes.
Just take a little break.
actually, why don't we do this? Stacking the bones is a good one for this.
Well, we're doing the sternum lift, but
Okay, but we have to do the sternum lift.
yeah, well, all the alignment principles apply
Yeah.
to every single pose.
Yeah.
We're just picking and choosing. This is a really good one because this is a very hard pose to
Yeah.
lift the sternum.
I know.
There is a gigantic pull down, and most people are going to give in to that and just see what it's like to lift.
Well, for me, may I just say that all of a sudden I'm sort of tracking, are my bones stacked? Is my hip over my knee? And even where my foot is it in the same line?
That's right.
Shoulder over the knee, and
And your pillar looks fantastic right now, by the way.
and also the opening of the heart. So like for me, this pose is actually, because this would normally pull me off center a little because of the variation in the pose. But having to find my balance on one knee, keep the bones stacked and keep my sternum lifted and my shoulder blades down and my gaze at you.
It's a big pose. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If I try to incorporate all of that into learning a pose, the people would be like,
Yeah,
the little
but
explosion.
but I'm
Now
noticing
you're
I'm doing it.
Yeah. It only takes like one day of really digging in.
Yeah.
And now I want you to guys just play with the lats. So the way that we lift the sternum is we pull down through the back. So everybody can have more space between the ears and the traps. Just try it. It's going to be really strong on the back. Okay, if you're doing this properly, your hands are really engaged. If your hands are lax, that means the rest of your upper
So
body
there's
is
another
lax.
principle.
Yes. So to lift the chest, it's intimately related to the lats. Okay, and that pulling down to lift up. Can you guys feel, even with that adjustment, your hip flexor psoas connection? Anybody else feel that? It was all like, whoop, right? That's the line of energy. All right, let's switch sides. So let's actually go and let's keep it even, just for symmetry's sake. Let's go to the ankles, which is the original half Buddha pose, and see if you move the leg to the ankle, which makes it a more intense pose, do you lose the alignment? And just play with that. See if that's true for you. So use the mat to find your alignment, right? Good, very good. It's like the knee will be right at the edge of the circle. Now, because the hips are tight, you're kind of kinking out. Deepen in the hip flexor there, and that'll bring you back onto center line. There you go. It's like, chick chick. Yeah, and you can see it when people are like wobbling it off, and when they come back in, there's usually some tightness in the body that's avoiding them. Or pull down with your shoulders even more. That's what we're working on right now. So what happens is if we go from one alignment principle to the other, we usually lose it, right? So we don't want to lose the openness of the heart because we're grounding through the pelvis.
Yeah.
That's the whole point.
I have not found anything like this swing to work with that, like having to stabilize in gravity and
It is
suspension
intense. Yeah.
at the same time. Never experienced that
Yeah.
before. It's like a whole part of my brain or something.
And I'm not just trying to toot my own horn, although I am a bit of a tutor. The swing is holding you in alignment because it's built and designed based in sacred geometry. If the swing was not based in sacred geometry, you would not be able to find these lines the same way. I used other equipment for a good 15 years before making my own, and I was like, what the hell are these people doing? It was all off. it wasn't holding my body in alignment, it was pulling it out of alignment because you mentioned the Da Vinci guide and the axes
And the
right,
planes.
and the planes. And when we design something that's based on the golden ratios and those mathematics, you can find your alignment easier, right? Otherwise, it's going to pull us off axes if it's not the right mathematical formula. That's why somebody can be 6 foot tall and 5'5" or 4'9" and use the same piece of equipment and fit. That's what the Da Vinci guide represents. Very good. Okay, chest lifted. Feel what happens in your hip flexor when we stack the bones and lift the sternum in a pose like this. Beautiful. Okay, come on out. I'm going to have us come to stand and mix it up and come into a forward fold, because lifting the heart in a pose like cat's meow, so always stay seated and take the leg loop off. We don't want to come to stand because then we could wobble and fall over. And that's a real common thing with new folk, is they tend to have one leg loop on and try to stand up, and then they wobble all over the place. Okay, so I'm going to come into a forward fold and practice lifting from the heart. So there's 2 poses I'm going to do here. You guys can watch for the first round and then we'll do it together. First one is angel wings. And what I love about angel wings is if your head is heavy and you are bending at your hip creases, you cannot lift your upper body up. It's amazing how challenging it is. Once we find our pillar and we're working with our axes by pressing forward with our hips and then leading with the heart. Can you guys see my heart is lifted? My head is aligned with the body. Then I press my hips forward. I can come up and down with ease. Okay, so I want you to just practice for a few rounds with the idea of lifting the heart, lifting the sternum, and finding that dynamic tension of pressing down through your hips and lifting up with your heart and keeping a long line of energy in the spine. So up onto the toes, hips press forward, hips forward to the front of the mat. Yep, all the way, tension on the swing, you get to hug. So no, see that will happen if you don't really have the grip.
Yeah.
Right? So everybody go ahead
done
and
any
let's
forward
everybody
folds.
face the garage door so we can all have enough room for one another. And see if you can find it. Really practice it until it becomes second nature. Press forward with the hips, keep the heart lifted, keep the head lifted, lower the chest. Up, keep the feet grounded. Walk your feet forward so they're grounded. There you go. Really ground through the feet, come up and down with control. Keep the head lifted the whole time and lead with the heart. Okay? Yeah. Head lifted the whole time. Wings. Wings, stack the bones, wings.
This is, I ate something
Yeah.
and I feel
Just
like
take a little break. So wings means T the arms, we stack the bones. T. Where's your T? That's a Y. So a T is up here, and we stay out to a T. Lift the heart, turns out to a T. Beautiful. That's it. So that heart lifted in a pose like this when we're head diving is heart diving. Keep the head in line with the body, don't look down. Remember your axes. Beautiful. See how challenging it is in some of these poses to keep the alignment? And when we lose the alignment, we lose the pose, which is, so Barbara, your arms stay out in a T the entire time. Okay, so just try and keep the stacking of the bones and the lifting of the heart and feel how different this pose is. Pressing the hips forward to come up. That's it. Beautiful, guys. So so T the arms the entire time. That's not a T. Look at your thumbs. See where a T is? Okay, that's a Y. Okay, come on back up. Let's all hang out here together.
Yeah,
So this is
my stomach is
okay.
really upset.
T. Turn around and look at me. Okay, let's get out of story time and back into our bodies. T. For whatever reason, when we go into different poses, everyone just goes right into the Y. When you go into the Y, your head dives forward. This is the strongest line of energy. Batter stack right out in front and straight up. Okay, so when I say T the arms, straight out, thumbs up. That's it. The other pose is right in front. These are our only 3 options in every pose. Straight up, if we're in a handstand, T in all the other poses, or push-up position. That's it. No other choices. for us, for the alignment principles. Obviously, you can transition through things, but I want to get this in the body so we know the long lines of energy. Okay, so that was my choice because that one's really hard. How you have to lift the chest and how everybody wants the head dive. As soon as you have the head dive, your pelvis sinks back and you completely lost the pose. Your hips have to press forward in this very awkward trusting of the swing that we're not used to. Okay, we're gonna pause there and give ourselves another 10-minute break. We can probably do 15 minutes when somebody shows up for our workshop, and then we'll jump into doing some more alignment principles, rest.
I think I'm gonna get in the hammock.
Yes,
Cocoon. I think that'd be good.
What a concept.